I'm Judith Hayes. I'm 35 years old, a single mom to Dakota. And until that night, I thought I knew what rock bottom felt like. Turns out it has a basement and it smells like sparkling cider mixed with betrayal. Let me take you back to that New Year's Eve gathering at my father's house. The annual one with the big countdown on TV noisemakers ready, and family tension simmering just under the surface. My stepmother had been dropping little comments all evening about who really belonged at the main table, how some seats were meant for actual grandchildren. Then, right as the clock hit 11:47 p.m., I remember because I was staring at it to avoid eye contact. The door opened with perfect dramatic timing. My half-brother's little girl walking in late, all dressed up and excited for the ball drop. My stepmother's whole face changed. She stood up, walked straight to where Dakota was sitting, the same chair my daughter had used every year since she could reach the table, and announced to the room that this seat was for her real granddaughter. Dakota froze. When she didn't move fast enough, my stepmother grabbed the chair and pulled hard. Dakota went down fast, knee-slamming the hardwood tears immediate. Her party hat fell off, a glass-tipped champagne spilling across the white tablecloth. But the worst part, the absolute worst, was the silence. 20 people, including my own father, just sat there watching like it was part of the evening's entertainment. Before I continue this story, please hit that like button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. Your support means everything. Thank you. My stepmother didn't realize it then, but that push wiped away the last reason I had for staying quiet all these years. To understand why that single moment changed everything forever. After that night at the party, I took Dakota home, cleaned the bruise, and held her until she fell asleep. But all the old memories came flooding back. To understand why that push made everything explode, you need to know what had been building for over 30 years. I was very young when my parents divorced. I only remember the weekend visits with my dad getting fewer and fewer until they stopped. He was busy with the company, and then he met Barbara. They got married when I was about 5. At first, I thought it was a good thing. Barbara smiled a lot, cooked well, and my dad seemed happier. 2 years later, Chase was born. That's when things started to change, even if I didn't notice it right away. Barbara quickly became the one who handled everything at home. My dad was trying to keep the handmade wooden toy company going that my grandma Eleanor had built from nothing in Vermont. Grandma passed when I was little, leaving the company and some kind of trust that people only mentioned in passing as for the grandkids when they're older. Barbara said she was good with money and my dad let her take over the books. I didn't think much of it. Chase was a baby, getting spoiled was normal. But as he grew up, the differences became clearer. Chase got everything: the best private schools in the area, expensive summer camps, piano lessons, hockey gear. When he went to college, my parents paid full tuition at a top school and gave him a new car when he graduated. After that, they helped him open his own workshop inside the company, calling it Investing in the Future. I was completely different. I went to public school, took the bus, worked at a coffee shop to pay for books. When I asked my dad about Grandma's trust for college costs, he just said, "Dad's got it handled, focus on studying." Lady, Barbara would usually add in that soft but firm voice, "Don't make it harder on your father, he's already doing so much." I swallowed it. I thought I needed to be more independent. I graduated, applied for a job at the family company, but only got an entry-level admin role. Barbara said, "You have to start from the bottom." Meanwhile, Chase, fresh out of school, was put in charge of a whole product line. I met my ex, got married too fast, had Dakota. The marriage didn't last. When we divorced, I became a single mom, working double shifts to support her. Holiday parties, I still brought Dakota to my dad's house. He was happy to see his granddaughter, hugged her, but Barbara always had a way of making us feel a little out of place. Chase is 28 now with 6-year-old Remy. Remy is the center of attention. Big birthday gifts, private art classes, everyone in the family calling her the little princess. Dakota gets smaller things, and Barbara often says, kids need to learn to appreciate what they have. I tried asking my dad straight about Grandma's trust. He said it was still there, would be available when I needed it. But when I asked to see the papers to plan for Dakota's future education, Barbara appeared. Let me look into it for you, don't add more worry for your dad. Dad nodded, and I let it go again. One time, I accidentally saw strange invoices on my dad's old desk, transfers to companies I didn't recognize, large amounts. I asked Barbara, said they were normal business expansion costs. Dad said, don't worry about that stuff. I stayed quiet, but the doubt started creeping in. Then there's cousin Ryan. He's family on my dad's side, worked in production management at the company for years. He was good, everyone liked him. Then suddenly he left. Later, he told me privately that Barbara had slowly pushed him out, saying the position needed someone more trustworthy for the family. Ryan was angry, but Dad said, it's internal business, don't take it outside. After that, Ryan kept his distance from everyone. All these years, I told myself it was just my imagination. Dad was still Dad, even if he called less. Barbara was just protecting her new family. Chase was my brother, even if we grew up so differently. I took care of Dakota myself, didn't want to cause trouble. I worked hard, moved up in a job outside the company, saved every penny for my daughter. Holiday gatherings, I still showed up, smiled, acted like everything was fine. I thought silence was the way to keep peace. But that New Year's Eve party, when Barbara pushed Dakota out of the chair just to make room for Remy, everything I'd been holding back came rushing out. I looked at my dad sitting there doing nothing, saw Chase smiling like it was no big deal, and I knew I couldn't pretend anymore. The old doubts, the times I'd been brushed off, the obvious favoritism, the strange papers, all became sharp and clear. I held Dakota tighter that night, and for the first time in years, I felt ready to face the truth I'd been avoiding for so long. They had no idea that in over 30 years of watching quietly, I'd learned a lot. That night, after Dakota finally drifted off, I sat alone in the living room with the lights off. The house was silent, the kind of quiet that comes after too much noise. Outside, occasional fireworks still popped as people celebrated the new year. I couldn't stop replaying the evening, the way Barbara had announced it to the whole table, the yank of the chair, Dakota's small body hitting the floor. My hands were shaking as I pulled out the old USB drive from the back of my desk drawer. Grandma Eleanor had given it to me years ago, right before she got really sick. She'd pressed it into my hand one afternoon when we were alone, saying quietly, keep this safe. It's copies of important papers about the company and the trust. You might need them someday. I hadn't looked at it much back then. It felt too heavy, like opening it would mean admitting something was wrong. But tonight felt different. I plugged it into my laptop. The drive opened slowly. It was old files from 15-20 years back. Scanned documents mostly. Bank statements, emails printed out, notes from meetings with the estate lawyer. I started reading. At first, it was just regular business stuff. Supplier invoices for wood. Payroll records. Then I noticed things that didn't add up. Transfers to accounts with names I didn't recognize. Companies that seemed to exist only on paper. Amounts moved out of what looked like the trust account labeled management fees, or reinvestment. One set of documents showed the trust principal shrinking steadily over time. Another had emails between my dad and Barbara discussing optimizing the funds for family needs. Nothing was blatant. No big red flag screaming fraud. But the pattern was there if you looked long enough. Money that was supposed to be protected for me and my future kids was being chipped away year after year. I sat there for hours scrolling, taking notes on my phone, screenshotting key pages. By the time the sky started turning gray, I had enough to know this wasn't just my imagination. I knew I had to do something, but I didn't want to make a big scene. Not yet. I opened my email and found the contact for Mr. Harlan, the lawyer who'd handled Grandma's estate all those years. His firm still existed. I'd seen his name on old letters. I wrote one message. Calm. professional. Subject: concerns about the Eleanor Reyes trust. I explained that I'd found old documents and had questions about how the trust had been managed. I attached 5 key files, the ones showing the most questionable transfers and balance changes. I asked if he could review them and let me know if everything looked proper. I read it 3 times, then hit send at 3:17 a.m. Then I closed the laptop and waited. New Year's Day was quiet in our neighborhood, most people sleeping in. My phone stayed silent through breakfast. Around 10, I saw my dad's car pull up outside. He and Barbara came to the door together. Dad looked tired. Barbara looked tense. "Judith," Dad said when I opened the door, "we need to talk about that email you sent Harlan." I let them in. Barbara didn't waste time. "Those are private documents. You shouldn't have gone through them." Chase showed up 20 minutes later, knocking hard. "Sis, what's going on? Dad said you sent something to the lawyer." Apparently, Mr. Harlan had called my dad first thing that morning. Professional courtesy, I guess. Asked if he was aware of the documents and if there was anything he needed to clarify. Dad tried to stay calm. "It's probably just a misunderstanding. The trust has always been managed properly." But I could see the worry in his eyes. Barbara kept checking her phone. "The bank just called about verifying some old transfers, and one of our bigger suppliers wants confirmation on payment schedules." Chase paced. "This is crazy. Why would you do this now?" The calls kept coming throughout the day, the accountant asking for records, a partner in the company wanting to know if there were any issues with the trust funding, even the lawyer's office confirming receipt and saying they'd need time to review. Dad sat on the couch with his head in his hands at one point. Barbara made calls in the kitchen, voice low but sharp. I made coffee, stayed quiet, watched it all unfold. Part of me felt guilty. This was my family, people I'd known my whole life. But another part felt something I'd never allowed myself before, a sense of power, of finally having information they didn't control. They stayed for hours trying different approaches. Dad appealed to family loyalty. "We're all on the same side here, Judith." Barbara tried guilt. "After everything we've done for you and Dakota." Chase got angry. "You're going to destroy everything over some old papers." By evening, they left with promises to get this straightened out quickly. But their faces told a different story. The new year had barely started, and already everything felt different. I sat alone again that night, listening to distant celebrations, knowing I'd crossed a line there was no going back from. Whatever came next, I'd started it. And for the first time in years, that didn't scare me. It felt like breathing. The weeks following New Year's felt like walking through thickening fog. At first, the pressure came in waves from my family. Dad called almost daily, voice calm but strained, asking if I'd thought more about dropping this whole thing. Barbara sent emails with subject lines like, "Let's talk for Dakota's sake." I kept responses short or none at all. Then the official letter arrived. Thick envelope, law firm return address. Inside papers claiming I had committed defamation by making false statements about the trust management and interference with family business operations. They were seeking damages that would have taken everything I had, my savings, my home equity, even future earnings. The lawyer's name was new to me, but the signature line showed he specialized in family disputes and reputation protection. Barbara called the same day the papers were delivered. Her tone was different now, less pleading, more businesslike. "Judith, this doesn't have to go to court. We can end it quickly. Sign the family resolution agreement I sent, withdraw your inquiry with Harlan, and we'll consider the matter closed. No one wants this dragged out." The agreement was attached again. It required a signed statement from me saying I'd been mistaken in my concerns, that all trust management had been proper, and that I'd never raise the issue again. In return, they'd drop the suit and maintain family harmony. I read it twice, feeling the walls closing in. Dad came over 2 days later without Barbara this time. He sat in my living room, hands clasped, looking worn. "You're breaking apart what I've spent my life building," he said quietly. "The company, the family name, all for what some old papers you don't understand." I asked why, if everything was above board, they were fighting so hard to stop a simple review. He sighed. "It's complicated business stuff. Barbara handles it better than I do. We've done what's best for everyone, including you and Dakota." But he couldn't look me in the eye when he said it. Chase took the fight public. His first post was a photo of him and Remy in the workshop, her little hands on a half-finished wooden truck. Caption: "Teaching the next generation what hard work really means. Some people forget family comes first." Comments rolled in fast from local folks, people who'd known our family for years. Then he posted a longer one. "It's sad when greed makes someone attack their own parents in their later years. My mom and dad have given everything to keep Grandma's legacy alive, and now they're being questioned by someone who wants more than their fair share." He tagged the company page, used hashtags like WAM, Family First, Walling Support Small Business. Shares came from employees, old customers, even some distant relatives. "Can't believe someone would do this to Gerald and Barbara. Prayers for the family. Stay strong. Greedy people always show their true colors eventually." The messages piled up in my notifications. Some direct, "Heard about the trouble. Hope you reconsider for your dad's sake." A couple of cousins stopped responding to my texts. One sent a private message, "This is hurting everyone. Think about Remy." Even at Dakota's school pickup, I caught whispers from other parents. One mentioned hearing about some family legal stuff with a sympathetic but distant smile. The isolation settled in deep. Groceries felt awkward, running into people who suddenly had somewhere else to look. Barbara sent another email with an updated agreement, this one with a deadline. "Sign by Friday or we proceed fully with the lawsuit." Dad tried one last in-person visit. He brought photos. Old ones of me as a kid with him at the workshop, Chase as a baby, even one with Grandma Eleanor. "Remember how close we were," he said. "Don't throw that away over misunderstandings." When I asked again about the specific transfers I'd seen, he changed the subject. Chase's posts kept coming. One with Remy holding a sign she'd colored, "I love Grandpa and Grandma." Comments: "That poor little girl. Protect your family, Chase." The online judgment felt endless. Some nights I lay awake, phone face down, to stop the notifications, wondering if they were right. If I was the one causing all this pain, if backing down would be easier for Dakota. But then I'd think about the patterns in those documents, the way they'd fought so fast and so hard. They weren't scared of the truth coming out because it was clean. They were scared because it wasn't. The pressure built every day. Legal, emotional, social. I felt cut off from the world I'd grown up in. More alone than I'd ever been, but something in me had shifted. I wasn't going to sign. I wasn't going to stop, even if it meant standing completely by myself. The turnaround didn't come with fanfare. It started quietly about 3 weeks after the lawsuit hit. I was checking my email one evening when a message popped up from a name I hadn't seen in years. Cousin Ryan. "Judith, I heard through the grapevine about the legal stuff with the company. If you're digging into how Barbara handles things, I might have something that could help." My heart skipped. We arranged to meet at a small diner halfway between our towns, somewhere neutral. Ryan showed up with a thick folder under his arm. He looked older, but the same direct way of talking. After small talk about our kids, he got to it. "When Barbara pushed me out years ago, it wasn't just about restructuring. She rewrote supplier contracts to favor companies that kicked money back, quietly through inflated invoices." He slid the folder across the table. Printed emails from back then, contract copies, payment records showing overcharges for raw wood materials. 3 suppliers had been affected the most. Ryan had kept everything because he'd always suspected more was going on. "I reached out to 2 of them last week," he said. "They're still angry. They'll share their records if it comes to that." The documents matched patterns I'd glimpsed in Grandma's files. Same shell companies, same routing. Having Ryan on my side felt like the first real support I'd had in months. Mr. Harlan called shortly after. He'd completed a thorough review of the trust against the documents Ryan and I provided. The discrepancies are substantial, he said. Withdrawals that violate the terms. And there's a clause Grandma Eleanor insisted on: automatic transfer of control to the primary beneficiary if mismanagement or fraud is verified by court or regulatory finding. That beneficiary was me upon reaching age or upon trigger. He was preparing to file for enforcement. News traveled through official channels first. The bank placed holds on certain accounts pending clarification. A major wood supplier sent a formal letter requesting verification of past payments before extending new credit. Dad's lawyer fired off demands that I cease harassment. But the tide was turning. Then the IRS entered the picture. Not from a direct tip by me, Harlan's firm had an obligation to report suspicious patterns during the trust review. An agent requested company tax records for the past 7 years, business deductions, expense categorizations, related party transactions. Gerald and Barbara brought in a tax specialist immediately. Chase went quiet online. Some family members who had distanced themselves started reaching out cautiously, asking what was really happening. Over the following months, the evidence accumulated steadily. Ryan's suppliers provided sworn statements about overpricing and redirected funds. Harlan's forensic accountant traced more transfers that breached trust restrictions. The protective clause was formally invoked in court filings. Temporary oversight of trust assets shifted pending full hearing. Dad tried another meeting, this time with Barbara present. They offered settlement terms. Drop everything, sign, non-disclosure, small payout. But the momentum was no longer theirs. Barbara attempted to reframe transactions as legitimate business strategy, but the paper trail didn't support it. Suppliers' records showed consistent overcharges benefiting linked entities. IRS interviews with former employees revealed questionable deductions. One by one, the explanations fell apart. I watched from a distance as their defenses weakened. Ryan became a steady ally, helping organize documents. Harlan kept things professional, updating me on each development. Even a couple of longtime company workers contacted me privately, saying they'd always wondered about certain decisions but stayed quiet for their jobs. The picture became clearer with every new piece. Not a sudden explosion, a steady uncovering. Gerald and Barbara fought every step. Motions, delays, counterclaims. But each effort exposed more. I began sleeping better. The isolation eased as facts replaced rumors. For the first time in decades, I felt the balance shifting. Not through anger, through persistence. The truth buried for years was finally surfacing, and it was on my side. After all this time watching from the edges, things were changing. Slowly, surely. I could see the path ahead. The hearing was held in the county courthouse in Vermont, a plain building with fluorescent lights and wooden benches that creaked. It was a combined civil and minor criminal matter. The trust violations tied to the IRS tax evasion findings. No big crowd. A few local reporters, some company employees on break, Harlan and the prosecutors on one side, my dad and Barbara's legal team on the other. The judge was straightforward, no drama. Harlan laid out the case methodically: the diverted trust funds, the improper deductions, the pattern of self-dealing over years. Suppliers' statements were read into record. The IRS agent summarized the audit results: unreported income, falsified business expenses, penalties accruing. Dad sat still, staring ahead. Barbara took notes face tight. Their lawyer argued reasonable doubt, good faith errors in complicated family business accounting, but the evidence was too consistent. After 3 days, the prosecution offered a plea agreement to avoid full trial. Gerald and Barbara took it. Gerald received probation, 3 years suspended, plus heavy financial penalties, and ordered restitution to the trust. Barbara forfeited all inheritance claims under Grandma's will and was required to repay misdirected amounts with interest. The company had to sell off a portion of inventory and equipment to cover back taxes and fines. Chase, who'd personally guaranteed some of the business loans for his parents, couldn't handle the called debts and filed for bankruptcy protection. I was granted full legal control of the remaining company assets and the reformed trust. The judge signed the orders that afternoon. The courtroom emptied quietly. No one from their side spoke to me. Dad glanced my way once as he stood to leave, but said nothing. Barbara gathered her things and walked out with the lawyer. Chase hadn't attended the final session. I left the building alone. The Vermont air was cold snow flurries starting. That evening, I blocked their numbers, deleted old emails, removed myself from any remaining family group texts. When holiday cards arrived for Dakota, I set them aside, unopened. I skipped the traditional gatherings at the old house, declined invitations from distant relatives who still tried to bridge things. Complete separation, no contact, permanent. It wasn't done in anger. It was done for clarity, for safety, for Dakota. The company transition took time. Some longtime employees chose to leave uncomfortable with the change. Others stayed saying the books finally made sense. I restructured slowly, cleaned up contracts, paid outstanding suppliers, fairly focused on quality over quick growth. Dakota adjusted. She stopped asking about Grandpa and Grandma after a while. We built new traditions, small gatherings with friends' trips, just the two of us. I enrolled her in activities she loved without worrying about comparisons. The legal fallout settled without much public noise. Local paper ran a short article about the plea and asset adjustments. Nothing more. Gerald and Barbara sold the big house, moved to a condo outside town. Chase started over in an apartment working entry-level somewhere. I learned these things through public records or casual mentions from people who knew both sides. I didn't seek updates. Didn't need them. The boundary was absolute. No exceptions. No second chances. As the seasons passed, the old weight lifted completely. I slept through the night, woke without dread, focused on what was mine to build. The company stabilized, then grew steadily. Dakota thrived. We had peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing exactly where the lines are drawn and never crossing them again. The past stayed where it belonged, behind a closed door, locked. 1 year later, as another New Year's Eve approached, my life looked nothing like it used to. The company had not just survived, it was growing in ways I never expected. With clean books and fair practices, we landed new contracts with bigger retailers who valued handmade quality. Orders increased steadily. I brought in fresh designs focused on sustainable wood sources, and the workshop hummed with energy. Employees who stayed told me they felt valued for the first time. No more rushed decisions or questionable shortcuts. Profit sharing became real, and people showed up motivated. I ran things my way, steady, transparent, long-term. Dakota thrived in the calm that came with it. She attended a good public school with small classes, made real friends, joined art club and soccer. Evenings were ours, cooking together, reading weekend hikes in the Vermont woods. No more tense holiday visits. No more walking on eggshells. We built our own traditions. Small gatherings with people we chose. Quiet celebrations that felt genuine. I heard nothing directly from my old family. No calls on birthdays. No cards. No attempts to reach out. Gerald and Barbara kept to themselves in their smaller place. Chase rebuilt slowly from what little I learned through neutral sources. Remy grew up without us in her daily life. I didn't check. Didn't wonder. The boundary held firm. Absolute. It wasn't cruelty. It was necessity. For my peace. For Dakota's future. Some people asked if I ever regretted going so far. If cutting ties completely was too harsh. I didn't. Blood doesn't earn a place if it costs your well-being. Family isn't a title you inherit. It's a relationship you maintain with respect and safety. When that respect is gone for decades, when it puts your child at risk, you protect what's yours. I chose us, every day. The company became more than Grandma's legacy. It became mine, built on honesty now. Profitable because it was right. Dakota grew confident, kind, unafraid to speak up. She saw what healthy boundaries looked like, what self-respect meant. That's the real inheritance I gave her. Not money moved in shadows, not a name tied to manipulation. Freedom to choose who stays in your life. As another year ended, I stood in the workshop late one evening, lights low, smelling fresh cut wood. Everything felt solid, earned, mine. Family isn't the place where you sacrifice your child to stay. It's the place where you protect them no matter what. I chose strong boundaries, and it was the best decision I ever made. Thank you for listening to my story.